Welcome everyone. Glad to see you on my channel. Today I will tell you about an unusual story, an amazing story about companionship and love. I wish you a pleasant audience. At the table, which clearly showed signs of a recent tea party, two dressed-up ladies sat opposite each other. The mistress of the house, putting her manicured hands to her heart and rolling her eyes, complained to her friend, "Yes, Anna, this is how strange life is. I never thought that my son would bring such a simple girl to meet. I'm surprised he even saw that Fiona. He went to see her off like a well-bred gentleman, so she wouldn't be blown away by a gust of wind, and now I'm worried how he's going to get home." She had been friends with Anna since time immemorial, when they still lived in a large communal apartment. Catherine, along with her grandparents, got there as a result of not the most pleasant circumstances, about which and did not want to remember, even after more than half a century. It was Anna, who was 5 years older, then took the patronage of the confused girl, for whom the rules of the communal apartment were some incredible wildness. As a child, this age difference seemed enormous. When the communal apartment was dispersed, the friends did not lose touch and, living in the same neighborhood, continued to help each other. And today, on such an important day, Anna seemed to drop in by chance, which was the order of the day for them and did not arouse any suspicion. Of course, in fact, the friend came specifically to support Catherine, but everything turned out differently. She chatted sweetly with Fiona, who had been introduced to her and was clearly happy for John, whom she had been nursing since he was in diapers and considered almost her son too. Catherine had been mistaken in thinking that Anna would share her point of view. The friend exaggeratedly official tone. Well-practiced voice said, "Congratulations, Catherine. In you, a real mother-in-law woke up." Guest, ironically smiling, outlined in the air silhouette in the form of a guitar, then patted her gods and continued, "Fiona is quite pretty. Indeed, except that she is very thin. But this, as we know, is correctable, and in the truest sense of the word. You and I, if you remember, were also thin and ringing, and then we built up such armor that now our figures are safely hidden and inaccessible to the prying eyes." The women, whose figures were indeed far removed from the model parameters, looked at each other without collusion, remembering the past, and burst out laughing. When the gust of merriment died away, the hostess returned to the subject of the impending mésalliance. "All the same, Anna, you see for yourself. Where he is and where she is. There are two great differences. Fiona has only the charm of youth and nothing more. She's not as intellectually gifted as my John. Anna, do you know, while we were alone in the kitchen, I asked her what her dream was. And do you know what she told me?" The interlocutor raised an eyebrow, showing her interest, and asked briefly, "And about what?" "A big family. She said that she dreams of having at least 2 children. Can you imagine such a thing? Yes, in today's times would be one to raise. It's crazy." To Catherine's surprise, her friend did not share her opinion and began to softly object, defending Fiona. "No, Catherine, you're wrong on her. To me, she seemed quite adequate. Sweet, modest, well-mannered. And what a craftswoman. Blouse, which I took for a boutique thing, it turns out. She sewed herself, and the homemade sweets she brought to the table, just the highest pilotage. Fiona's hands are golden. You won't have to worry about John. He'll always be well-fed and well-dressed. You can't deny it. I mean, what's the matter with a girl wanting children? As one will give birth, so maybe." And will change his mind to continue. Catherine pressed her lips. She was dissatisfied in acquaintance with her son's fiancé and what turned a conversation with her friend. Fiona was indeed not a bad girl. This additionally angered the mother, who wanted only the best for her child. Fiona, Not intending to arouse pity, sparingly told her that she had been orphaned at an early age, and then her younger brother had been raised by an older sister. Of course, the family hardly lived well, so the lack of higher education was justified. But at the same time, Fiona was not at all shallow and easily maintained a conversation about theater performances and the novelties of the book market. Obviously, the orphan children were very friendly and tried to engage in cultural development. Anna, as if clearly hearing her friend's thoughts, made another argument. It is probably because of the selfless act of her older sister, Fiona, and dreams of a large family. After all, a huge thing, the support of close people. You know, Catherine, I think you should take this girl without hesitation. Of course, you can first get acquainted with her sister and brother, but I'm more than sure that they are also wonderful people, each other for the mountain, and this is worth a lot. There was silence in the room again. The women thought about the vicissitudes of life, and at the same time John, who went to see the girl home, reassured his beloved, "Trust me, everything went fine. Mom, of course, was a little tense, but it's quite normal. But Aunt Anna sure liked you. You can rest assured that she'll be able to influence my mom in the right way, to open her eyes to how wonderful you are. Honestly, you should not worry about your mom. She's only strict in appearance, and in any case her opinion is not decisive. All I want is to be with you, so that's what I'll do." John returned home in a great mood and was just happy that his mother and Aunt Anna did not make him a showdown and dissuade him from marrying Fiona. However, the main battle for a man's freedom was still ahead. Catherine, as a shallow woman, decided to act not on the strength and cunning. Soon enough, she had a heart-to-heart conversation with her grown-up son. "Son, I have nothing against Fiona. She's nice and cute, but she's as simple as 3 pennies. She'll drag you into the bourgeois swamp. Diapers, raspashunky, and all that stuff. You don't even have to guess to find out how things will work out between you and Fiona. She'll start having babies, and you'll have to work so hard you won't see the light of day. Of course, you'll do your best, but do you really want to work forever? Fiona's not a bad girl, which is why you shouldn't ruin her life with this wedding, too. I know you well. You've been like that since childhood. You'll get an idea, you'll do anything to achieve it, and once the goal is achieved, it becomes unnecessary. It becomes unnecessary. It happened many times with a bicycle. With a skateboard. Or remember, you wanted to go scuba diving. How many times did you end up diving? 2 times, I think, right?" John tried to object. "Mom, that's not the same thing. Mom, that's not the same thing. One thing, childhood hobbies, and quite another now." Catherine shook her head negatively. "Oh, son, you are now in love. Almost blinded. Even the obvious things you have to explain. You will not last long in the monotony of life. Divorce with Fiona as a matter of course. It's good if you don't have kids, or you'll have to pay child support. And that could make it hard to build a new relationship in the future. Trust me, I know what I'm talking about. Leave Fiona alone, and she'll find her own real, quiet happiness. You have a whole other destiny. Find yourself another girl, more ambitious, a little more daring, so that together in this life to dig in and win back everything you can." But the man wouldn't give up. "I don't need any other girl." Disputes arose regularly, but despite the attempts and tricks of his mother, John still married Fiona. Catherine put up with her daughter-in-law, who turned out to be very wise for her age. Fiona was not going to bend to the opinion of a new relative, but behaved so tactfully that for a few months, while the mortgage was being processed and she and John lived in his mother's apartment, even managed to please the strict mother-in-law. The young woman passed by the ears, thin stilettos in her address, and showed herself as an ideal hostess. The first-born son, who was born a year after the wedding, even more reconciled mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. Catherine visiting her grandson Oliver, always surprised that Fiona and food cooked and the house is in order. The woman understood. A great merit in this belongs to her daughter-in-law and her closest relatives. The fact is that John and his wife had taken out a mortgage, and even with her mother's help, the option available to them was, of course, far from ideal. The apartment required repairs, and not only cosmetic. Despite this, the daughter-in-law did not complain or whine. Asking for help from her sister and brother, she organized the repair. With jokes, Alice and her husband, Michael and Fiona herself, entrusting the care of tiny Oliver mother-in-law, renovated the apartment, and for part of the work involved the team, which shortly before worked in the apartment of her older sister. Catherine admired the friendship of this trio. She was pleased to observe the warm relationship between sisters and brother, and all doubts about Fiona were in the past. The young woman indeed turned out to be a wonderful mother and wife. Catherine was inclined to agree with her friend's opinion. Anna had been more astute than herself, and had accurately noted that Fiona would be the perfect caretaker for John. 2 years after the firstborn, the family had a second boy named Justin. The change in family composition had little effect on the house, except that there were even more children's thing. Fiona still managed to do everything, and Catherine, remembering her attempts to break up her son with his fiancée, was very glad that her persuasions were useless. Her mother-in-law thought that her son and his wife would stop childbearing, but Fiona and John had their own opinions on the matter. Right after Oliver's first day of school, her daughter-in-law, who had gotten excited at the lineup from touching songs, went into rapid labor. Fiona was miraculously, or rather thanks to the skill of the driver of the ambulance that came to the call, managed to get to the maternity hospital. Almost in the corridor of a familiar institution in a woman was born a third son. Kevin's birth coincided with a crisis in the firm where his mother worked before maternity, and Fiona simply had nowhere to go. John was happy about it. That's fine. Stay home with the kids. I make enough money, and the boys will be looked after, and you won't have to work too hard. It'll be good for everyone. However, following the advice of her older sister Alice, Fiona sought not to close on the household and tried to engage in part-time work at home. Of course, with 4 men, counting her husband, there was a lot to do. The woman tried to feed them, and tasty, and nourishing, and varied, but in addition, as soon as the children grew up, began to actively involve them in helping around the house. It became much easier after the second son went to school, and the woman was able to build a new daily routine, which included both routine chores and fun with favorite boys. Mother-in-law, seeing what harmony reigns in the family of her son, did not cease to admire the tireless daughter-in-law. She tried to help Fiona with the children as much as she could and adored her grandchildren with all her soul. The more time passed, the more talents were discovered in her daughter-in-law, and Catherine was glad that her son had once been stubborn. Kevin was 4 years old, and Fiona had even gotten used to her status as a housewife. In addition, Anna regularly asked her best friend's daughter-in-law to sew or alter something and always paid fairly for the work, and then even began to send her not capricious and generous clients. The woman was engaged in children's home, contributed to the family budget, and was happy, except that John, as if thinking that Fiona with 3 boys now from him nowhere will not go anywhere, began to behave far from being a model family man. The man began to stay late at work. On weekends, more and more often began to go somewhere, explaining his absences by industrial necessity. If the woman thought of something bad, she immediately tried to banish sad thoughts, so as not to cause trouble. It seemed to Fiona that no force could separate her from John, but she was mistaken. In honor of her berry jubilee, Alice was going to organize a holiday at the cottage, with kebabs, overnight stays, and trips to a small river, which was a few kilometers from the site. The woman called and, asking her sister to turn on the speakerphone, invited all her family to a grand party, relentlessly describing to them all the advantages of vacationing in nature. The weather forecast will be hot and precipitation is not expected, so you can set up tents right on the site to sleep there because we cannot install air conditioning. It's a little stuffy in the house, to be honest. Jacob promised that he and his fiancée would be here on Thursday, but we're not celebrating without you. It didn't take much persuasion. Fiona and all her men were glad to meet their family and get some fresh air away from the stuffy city. The boys were very enthusiastic about the idea. They adored her family, and when they learned that Uncle Jacob would be attending the party, they were literally counting the hours until they left. At a brief family meeting, they decided to leave Friday evening as soon as John got home from work, especially since the man had nothing to do for the weekend and planned to spend time with his family and his wife's relatives. John took a very active part in the grocery shopping and gave Fiona an impressive amount of money to buy a gift. However, on the long-awaited day, returning from work, the man shocked his wife with the sudden news. "I think I ate something not quite fresh at lunch in the cafe. Something makes me feel sick and I have to go to the toilet. I'm afraid it's going to get worse. I think I'd better lie down." Fiona was worried and hurried to find a suitable remedy. The mother of many children had a home first aid kit that could compete with the equivalent in the paramedics' office. So the woman immediately brought her husband, who had settled down on the sofa, a first aid remedy. Handing John a pill and a glass of warm water, Fiona clarified, "Do you want us to stay here too? Wait until you feel better. We'll be on the road tomorrow morning. I'll explain everything to Alice. I'm sure she'll understand." John shook his head weakly. "Why make such sacrifices? The boys have been looking forward to this trip. Go without me. You'll have fun watching me run to the bathroom. No, you guys have fun. Have fun. As soon as I get some rest and feel better, I'll be there. Or you can bring me something from there if my ailment lingers." Fiona looked at the boys, who were already looking forward to a fun weekend, and agreed to her husband's plan, taking his promise that if he got worse, he wouldn't be a hero and would call for medical help. "Remember that the boys and I love you very much. Don't be sad without us." The man was so weak that he didn't even walk his family to the door and only waved to his sons. After standing in the usual Friday traffic at the exit from the city, Fiona confidently drove the car to her sister's dacha. Alice was very happy to have guests, although she was a little sad that her son-in-law was ill. When the celebration began, Jacob's kebabs were excellent, and his fiancée also joined in. The toasts were accompanied by a delicious chilled croissant, which was a welcome relief after a hot summer's day. Children were having fun, united in a multi-voiced pile. Mala. They were secretly playing mischief or playing hide, and seek in the grounds, and only occasionally came to the table for refreshment or to quench their thirst. Everything was going just fine, but Fiona was uneasy. In the middle of the feast, her sister approached her. "Fiona, why are you beating yourself up? Pack up and go to your husband. Don't worry about the boys. The children get along well with each other, and I think they will be happy to stay here without you. You can see they like it here. Go and soothe your soul." Fiona explained to her sons that their father needed her help now, and she needed to leave. It was in vain that she was worried that the children would beg to go home. On the contrary, Oliver himself offered to stay at the cottage and promised to look after the younger brothers. The woman didn't want to drive after drinking Crucian and called a cab. It wasn't economical, but it was even more wasteful to risk it. Fiona kissed her family and hurried to the car. The highway to the city was clear, and the cab was soon on its way. Fiona didn't want to disturb her husband, so she opened the door with her own key, and for a second, she froze in surprise. There was a stranger's woman's shoes in the hallway. Fiona was frightened that her husband had become so ill, after all, that he had called the paramedics on her advice. But there was no ambulance at the entrance, and it was unlikely that a doctor, even one called from a private clinic, would take his shoes off in a patient's apartment. Suddenly, Fiona felt sick. It suddenly dawned on her that her husband's indisposition was just an excuse to stay at home. The soft music and a woman's voice coming from the bedroom confirmed that John had lied to her. Her first inclination was to run out of the apartment, but Fiona decided to follow the bitter path of a betrayed wife to the very end. The woman jerked open the half-open bedroom door. Fiona watched the frank scene for a few seconds, and then suddenly began to applaud. The mistress, startled, cried out and turned around. The devoted wife recognized her as her husband's colleague. They had seen her several times, during corporate parties and once during a chance meeting at the mall. Fiona couldn't remember her name now, but her memory told her how she'd smiled sweetly and lusciously when John had first introduced her to her. Fiona thought about the situation absent-mindedly, as if her head was trying to protect her from a terrible pain. So most likely this ugly scene wasn't even an episode, but a multi-part story in which I'm assigned the role of an unaware, naive fool. John, noticing his wife in the doorway, literally pushed the confused mistress out of the way and turned to his lawful wedded wife. "Fiona, you've got it all wrong." The woman was even confused in response to such an insolent statement of her husband, and then clearly under the influence of adrenaline found the strength to joke. "Of course. I understand that you found an innovative cure for poisoning. It's got a lot of merit. I think it should be patented. Okay, John, I'll meet you in the kitchen." Can your date find her way out of the apartment on her own? Fiona turned around and went to the kitchen, which was also desecrated by her husband and his visitor. On the table were a bowl of fruit, sparkling wine, and 2 glasses. It was these 2 glasses, decorated with exquisite engraving with wishes of happiness, that her and John had been presented with at their wedding by her younger brother. Now there was lipstick on the rim of one of them. The woman felt disgusted to be in her own kitchen. Not only had her husband brought another woman into the house, but without thinking about the depth of his meanness, he was also serving his passion drinks from the commemorative flutes. With disgust, Fiona looked at the marks of her husband's betrayal. She was so disgusted by his behavior that she simply bent the edges of the almost new tablecloth, tied them in a huge knot, and then threw them to the floor. The flutes and other dishes that had been on the table a moment ago clinked pitifully. The oilcloth material was supposed to protect the floor from the possibility of leaks, but Fiona cared less. She heard the door slam. It sounded like her husband's mistress had left the apartment. The world focused down to John's face, who seconds later walked into the kitchen and stood across from the woman. As if nothing had happened, John inquired, "Where are the children?" The indignant woman very much wanted to answer profanely, but she restrained herself and asked her husband, imitating his intonation, "Where is your conscience? Not only did you obviously lie about your illness, but you brought a strange woman into the house to have fun while I'm away with the boys." John didn't even make excuses, but went on the offensive, making the woman feel guilty. If husbands didn't lie, most happy families would have broken up a long time ago. Besides, I'm sorry to be blunt, but you look like a horse that's been driven. You're always rustling around like an electric car. I'm looking for a new experience, a flight of emotions. You had to show up. Are you checking up on me? Fiona felt that a few more minutes and she would not be able to keep her emotions under control. So she tried to get him out as quickly as possible. "All right, John, if you've said all you want to say, then goodbye. I interrupted your flight by accident. I had no intention of distrusting you or testing you. I thought you were suffering here. But it turns out you're having an emotional flight. Go, maybe you'll catch up with your mistress and fly, but not in our apartment." The man gritted his teeth, but knowing his wife for 13 years of married life, decided not to develop a scandal and leave the apartment. The door slammed again. Fiona mentally noted that the sound was much quieter than after the departure of her husband's mistress. There were no tears, though resentment stung her heart and demanded action. Fiona felt that there was no way to erase the memories, so the linens would suffer the same fate as the tablecloths and dishes in the kitchen. She dragged the 2 bundles to the street dumpsters and returned home. Just at that moment, Alice's phone call rang. She was worried that Fiona hadn't let her know how she'd gotten there. The woman, devoted to her husband, tried to make her voice sound quite cheerful, and on the next question answered that John was feeling much better. This, however, could not at all be called a lie. As long as the woman hadn't come home at an unreasonable hour, he'd been doing just fine. Fiona decided not to upset her sister with the news of the collapse of her family life, reasoning that it was better to let the fun at the cottage continue. Asking how her sons were behaving, she didn't even listen to her sister very carefully and hurried to say goodbye. Fiona went to bed in the children's room, glad that they had recently refurbished the furniture and bought a large, comfortable bed for her older son, Senna, who had grown dramatically. The next morning, she planned to return to her sister's dacha and, tired of worrying, fell asleep instantly. Awakened by the early dawn, Fiona had time to put as much of her husband's things as she could into 2 travel suitcases. It wasn't too hard, especially since she didn't even try to fold the clothes neatly, but it did tire her mentally. The woman brewed and drank coffee, but before she could get ready, her plans had to be adjusted because of the trill of the intercom. Mother-in-law, to whom John obviously had time to tell about the mishap with his wife, who had not returned in time, came to visit from the morning to try to save the collapsed family of her son. Although Catherine had her own key to the apartment just in case, she did not open the door but delicately called from downstairs. Fiona assumed that her husband would try to send his mother to her with a peacekeeping mission and already regretted that she had not gone last night to her sister's dacha. However, it was foolish to hide. The woman opened the door to her mother-in-law, and Catherine almost immediately, as soon as she sat down on the chair offered to her in the kitchen and refused coffee, went on the offensive. Fiona, you can probably guess why I came to see you. I'm sorry about John. A man made a mistake, that's just the way they are. I caught my husband in the act too. John was just a kid, a little older than Kevin is now. His father begged me to keep the family together for the sake of the baby. But I'm a proud woman. I didn't listen to any of his advice and got divorced. And you know, I still regret it. A boy needs a father, or a grandfather in case of emergency. You know, a good male role model. Oliver's going to be a year or 2 away from puberty. Justin and Kevin adore their dad. And I know you still love John. Forgive him, if only for the boy's sake. It'll just take a little bit of time to get over it. Don't break up the family, please. Fiona did not want to prolong the unpleasant conversation, and she not too politely interrupted her mother-in-law. Hey, Karina, tell me John, probably near the entrance in the car waiting for you. Mother-in-law smiled happily, thinking that her little honorable mission succeeded, and daughter-in-law is ready to make peace with the traitor, so hurriedly nodded. Of course he wanted to come first to talk, honestly and frankly, but I talked him out of it. I wanted to prepare you in some way. Fiona nodded as if she had foreseen this turn of events and told her mother-in-law, call him, let him come up. Catherine quickly dialed her son's number, and in a few minutes the women heard the key turn in the door. In the kitchen where sat mother-in-law and daughter-in-law and daughter-in-law. John entered and asked, That's all, Mom. Thank you. If you can, leave us alone. Next, I want to talk to my wife alone. Catherine encouragingly winked at her daughter-in-law and lawned sideways out of the kitchen, saying that she would leave the keys to his car on the shelf so that, if necessary, John could go with his wife to the holiday to Alice, and slammed the door behind her. However, the woman could not have guessed what would follow. John turned on the kettle, then walked to the stove, put a frying pan on the fire, poured the butter, took the eggs out of the refrigerator. Breaking them into a cup as if nothing had happened, he asked, You want eggs to cook? The woman shook her head silently. She did not imagine the communication with her husband, who just a few hours ago caught with another in their apartment. She'd thought he'd make excuses, but John had shown remarkable composure. There was no fidgeting or nervousness in his demeanor. His movements were precise and measured, and soon he sat down calmly opposite his wife and began to devour the scrambled eggs. The man didn't seem at all embarrassed that Fiona kept her eyes on him. As John began his tea, the woman said to her husband, I'm not going to beat around the bush. You can talk to the kids any time you want, but I can't live with you anymore. Part of your things put in suitcases, they can get out. I'll file for divorce after the weekend. I think you're a sensible man and won't drag out the process." Fiona's words came as a complete surprise to John. The man had expected a completely different result. And before his wife's eyes there was a surprising metamorphosis. He turned from a calm man into an insolent man who turned to snide insults. "Oh, I can't tell you how tender she is. She can't live with me anymore. You can't live without me. You at least think for a minute. You at least think for a minute. You are now 35 years old in the hands of 3 sons. No one will need you with kids. You'll grow old, and when they leave home, you'll be alone. That's if they don't kick you out of your own apartment. So it's in your best interest to take me back. It's not going to be easy raising the boys on your own. So peace." After saying that, Fiona had no doubt that her married life with John was over. It was a shame for herself and for her sons, whom her husband had predicted would become scoundrels in the future. The woman gritted her teeth. "Get out." John realized that in his desire to hurt his wife crossed a very important boundary, but apologize was not going to. "Oh, you've ruined my appetite. Okay, if you want to stay divorced with kids. You're strong, you can handle it. I'm out of here. I'll pick up the rest of my stuff next weekend, so stay home." Fiona just smirked. "Don't worry, I don't want anyone else's. Come on in, or I might have left out a pair of socks. Besides, don't forget that you have children." The man turned and left the apartment. Fiona had a great desire to make a mess of the apartment he had so lovingly organized. But the only thing that stopped her was the thought of having to rebuild it herself. The woman was unable to stay alone. She hurriedly called a cab to go to her sister's dacha. Alice, barely a glance at the returning Fiona, realized that something strange had happened, and calling her sister aside so that their conversations would not be heard by the other guests, asked Ted, "What? Has John taken a bad turn? Was he hospitalized? Why don't you say something, Fiona? Tell me what happened." Fiona did not make up anything and honestly told about the recent events in the family. Alice hugged her sister and advised her not to make a hasty decision. "It's up to you, but I think John deserves a second chance. Whatever you decide, I'll be on your side and support you. The boys probably don't need to hear anything right now. Wait, maybe over the weekend you'll change your mind and try to rebuild your family. However, even if not, they'll at least have a few more happy days." Her sister's recommendation was not without a rational grain, and Fiona did not spoil her son's vacation. John never once called or tried to talk to his wife again, for he had a lot on his mind without trying to reconcile with his wife. Immediately after the failed reconciliation with Fiona, the enraged man brought the suitcases home to his mother and said, "I couldn't get that bitch to go away. So let her come running when she's in trouble. She'll be on my feet to make me come back sooner. Well, I'm going. I need to go for a walk, get some air." Catherine did not remind her son that she many years ago advised not to spoil Fiona's life and give up the idea of marrying her. She was offended that John himself destroyed the family, which, thanks to the efforts of her daughter-in-law, was almost perfect. Before she could argue to her son that Fiona was not a megastar, but only a victim of his stubbornness, and that it was his betrayal that had caused the quarrel. The man kicked the suitcases against the wall, as if taking out his anger on them, and left. Unhappy thoughts seized the woman. The sad story of her life repeated itself in the female fate of her daughter-in-law. Catherine felt sorry for Fiona, and especially for her grandchildren. Having gone through the same ordeal many years ago with her husband, John's father, the woman was well aware that in a Sunday Dad format, her son wouldn't be able to devote as much attention to the boys. She tried to figure out what she had missed in raising John, since he was able to tear the family apart so easily. The woman was so happy that her gloomy prediction about the breakup with Fiona did not come true, but it turned out in vain. All day, Catherine thought about how to persuade her son and daughter-in-law not to breed fever. She did not know how to talk sense into her son and felt unauthorized to pressure Fiona. The day flew by, and in the evening, the woman was in for another shock. John came staggering into the apartment in the company of an obviously not too sober lady and introduced his mother's companion. "Ginny, this is my mother, Catherine. The best in the world, I can tell you that," the man hiccuped and continued. "Mom, this is my Guinea. We're going to stay here for a while, okay?" In vain, John thought that his mother would accept his betrayal of his wife calmly. Catherine, who herself had been through such an ordeal, unexpectedly sided with Fiona, whom he betrayed. "Son, I'm not going to lie, but I'm pleased to meet the woman, because of whom you insulted your lawful wife. I'm only letting you into my apartment for one night, and that's only because it's dangerous to walk the streets like that. I don't want anything to happen to you, but you know I'm not going to let you turn my apartment into a mess." John's companion didn't seem the least bit embarrassed by the reception. Waiting until the man had gone to the bathroom, she smiled broadly and said, "I wasn't too keen on meeting you today either. I'm not in the right shape today, you know. I was so confused that I didn't even think to bring flowers. Please forgive me and understand. And in general, so that there was no ambiguity between us, I will explain. I have long loved your son, and I dare to assure you that I have the most serious intentions. I'm convinced that after they divorce, I will marry him. So whether you like it or not, we're going to have to communicate. You and I both want John to be happy, don't we?" It is not known what would have said in response to the impudent guest Catherine, because the man who returned to the ladies dragged his mistress to his former nursery, on the way to inform the indignant mother that they will not have dinner tonight. In the settlement of the family crisis in the life of her son, Catherine tried to connect her wise friend. Explaining the situation to Anna, the woman asked her to at least talk to John because she hoped that her son would listen to her. However, the man, as soon as his mother's friend began to lecture him on the need to value family, abruptly interrupted the conversation and did not stand on ceremony. "Aunt Anna, I have always respected you." "What is there? I almost consider you my kin. And I didn't expect you to meddle in my business, especially since you're trying to persuade the wrong person. It would be easier for me to stay with Fiona, but she's stubborn." John even chuckled, realizing the ambiguity of the phrase, and then continued in earnest. "I hope you will not burden me with this topic again. Goodbye." Seeing that his mother was reacting negatively to Ginny, John left his things in his parents' apartment and went on a wild spree with his mistress. The son and his sassy companion occasionally still came to Catherine's apartment to spend the night, not having found or not wanting to look for a suitable long-term rental housing. The behavior of a smashing couple, which, not at all embarrassed by the elderly woman, indulged in entertainment, greatly upset her. Her mother dreamed that John would come to his senses and return to his lawful wife. But the days flew by, and the man seemed to have forgotten about the family. At the request of her friend, Anna decided to go the other way, to influence Fiona. The elderly woman repeated almost the same thing that told her daughter-in-law Catherine, but the positive result did not achieve. Fiona, tired of everything that was happening, simply asked, "Anna, I hear from all sides that my boys need a father. I realize that myself. But how do I get over myself?" Anna did not know how to answer this question. Thanking Fiona for her time and leaving gifts for the boys, she left, hugging the strong and proud woman. Fiona was very worried, not knowing how to break the news to her sons that she was going to divorce their father. All week, feeling ashamed of her lies, she told the boys that Dad was just on a business trip, but it was impossible to lie to the children all the time. John suddenly took over the problem, coming in the next weekend to pick up the rest of his things. After a hug with the boys, who missed him very much, he sat them all down on the couch in front of him. Sat down in front of them in Turkish and began to explain that there would soon be a change in their family. "I am parting with your mother and will live with Grandma Katya for the time being. But I will come to visit you, and we will play and have fun on weekends as before." Fiona, who had slumped into a nearby chair at the beginning of the conversation, had tears in her eyes when she saw how upset her children were. Her heart was ready to shake, and she almost ran up to John to tell him she was ready to try a fresh start. But the man continued his heartfelt speech, and the woman was numb with loathing. "I'll introduce you guys to Ginny. She's great. She used to go camping, and she knows her way around a computer game. You'll have fun with her." Fiona was ready to howl in pain and resentment. But her eldest son had avenged her. Oliver got up from the couch and took Justin's hand in his, who in turn took Kevin's. Oliver threw his father a dismissive nod. "We're most interesting with Mom." The boys, clinging to each other, left the room and went to the nursery. Fiona listened to John's reproaches through the veil of tears that still came to her eyes. "Have you managed to turn your sons against me? Are you happy now? I didn't even know you'd go this way. They'll be more interested in you." The woman had neither strength nor desire to justify herself, and she just quietly asked, "Check if you got all your things, take them, and go away. I don't want to see you." However, the man was in no hurry. He, in the break between work and entertainment with his mistress, found out that the main problem could be a mortgage apartment and reported almost already ex-wife. "You'll have to see me anyway." Of course, I said a lot of things offensive, but it's just on the nerves. Besides, first of all, I don't renounce my children. Secondly, we have to go to the bank together to settle the apartment issue. And thirdly, you can't just throw away all these years together. You'll always remain my nearest and dearest person. Actually, I've been doing some calculations on how much mortgage we're going to have to pay. I think maybe we won't have to sell the apartment and get a smaller one. I guess we could get out of it. If you don't mind, we could meet at the bank tomorrow lunchtime. John's completely rational and unemotional approach discouraged Fiona, who was horrified at the thought that she and the children might be in danger of moving. Oliver and Justin go to a wonderful school with a strong teaching staff. Not only that, but Kevin's kindergarten is very close by, and there is no need to mess with transportation or depend on the vagaries of the weather. It was enough to leave the house, and in a few minutes you could be in the right place. Thoughts swirled through Fiona's head, and even her tears dried up. She needed to pull herself together and fight for the right to keep the apartment. If she went on principle and demanded to divide the property through the court, the result could be unpredictable. So the woman agreed to John's proposal. Everything went so routinely that Fiona even had a hope that the upcoming divorce proceedings will not affect the usual routine, because what to say most of the time with the boys she was engaged in, and John has long been approaching the role of Sunday father. The divorcing couple informed the bank, where they took out a mortgage, about the significant changes in their lives, and a nice girl, consultant, explained in detail all the options for resolving the situation. On the way home, Fiona thought aloofly that this bank employee sees family dramas like hers on a daily basis, and in her case, the solution was not the most difficult. Thanks to the impressive amount of money John had brought with him, there were only a few payments to be made, and everything had been arranged so that the apartment would go to her and the children after the final payment. Only a few formalities remained to be settled. Still, the generosity of the man she had once loved so much gave Fiona faith that they would be able to remain in a normal relationship even after they were divorced. It seemed to the woman that with the collapse of the marriage, her life was not yet over. By mutual agreement with John, she did not file for alimony, receiving in return a promise to pay her sons a fixed amount each month, plus help in emergencies. Catherine was proud of her son, who, when divorced, behaved unlike his father, decently, and supported Fiona, assuring that he would always support his grandchildren. It seemed that the participants of the family drama could be happy, but such a favorable resolution of the situation did not suit one single woman. The money stream from John gradually began to chalk up. The first few months he fulfilled his promises with more than enough, but then, under one pretext or another, began to reduce the amount. Although Fiona did not luxuriate and got a job in an atelier, because now she began to be short of money with her sons. Fortunately, grandmother did not forget about the children. And Alice and Michael constantly tried to help. The children had somehow grown up overnight, and even the youngest son began to treat purchases more wisely. Kevin now walked calmly past the cookery shop where he loved to go almost daily for tasty puff pastries and reasoned Mom's baking is 100 times better. Fiona practically stopped using the car so as not to spend on gasoline and maintenance. In addition, the car was registered to John. And one not the most beautiful day, the man simply told her that the term of the Menseal policy is coming to an end, and in a new document he decided not to enter her. I thought, you've got nowhere to go. Everything is nearby, so the car would be idle, and I'd have to take public transportation or beg my mom for a car. Fiona did not even argue, and realizing that the man is not even going to meet with the children, just handed her ex-husband a set of the car. All the same, the car now for her has become an unacceptable luxury. The boys who missed their father saw him less and less often. Usually they talked to him on the phone, but gradually the length of the calls decreased. Fiona noticed that about 6 months after she divorced John, the children almost stopped asking about him. Her eldest son tried to take on the role of head of the household altogether. Oliver started walking the neighbor's dog and brought the small amount the old lady had rewarded him with to his mother. Fiona, of course, tried to return the money to the neighbor, but she refused flatly. "Baby, Oliver's growing up to be a real man. He worked hard for you. He helped me out and earned that money by his own labor, and you're hurting him. Listen to me and buy everyone something nice." Fiona left with nothing, but she asked Oliver to consult with her before he got involved in any projects. The woman suspected that the real reason her ex-husband's income had dwindled was the influence of the separated woman, and she was not wrong. Shortly after they divorced, John married Jeannie, who had managed to go from mistress to lawful wife. The woman immediately after the marriage said to her now, legal husband, that it is silly to wander around in rented corners if he has a share in his mother's apartment. "You're a fool, John. Imagine how much money we'd save if we lived with your mother on a permanent basis, especially since you have every right to do so. And me as your lawfully wedded wife, too. Besides, I'm sick of living in other people's bed and breakfasts, and I would also adjust the amount of money that you, as an honest, wonderful father, pay off your sons, adjusted to a much smaller side. Think about it. In the mortgage, you, of course, much more invested than the ex-wife, and in fact she gave her the apartment. Isn't that a bit too much for her?" John tried to assert his right to manage the money he'd earned, but Ginny kept nagging at him. "John, understand, this isn't nobility anymore. It's just plain stupidity. You're sponsoring this mother of many children, and you don't even ask for an accounting of where the money goes. You think she spends it all on her kids? Don't make me laugh. She's clearly ripping you off. Wait till she files for alimony to make things harder for you. Imagine if we go on vacation, and it turns out you owe her alimony. What then?" The man tried to weakly defend Fiona, but Ginny just started crying, and John rushed to comfort her. The cunning woman had long ago figured out how to deal with this man to get whatever she wanted. Catherine was not thrilled with her new daughter-in-law, but had to put up with the circumstances for the sake of her son's happiness. Ginny was a stark contrast to the modest, tactful Fiona, but John didn't seem to notice that his mother was growing sadder by the day. Catherine's room became increasingly filled with the odors of medicine, and several times the woman even had to call an ambulance. Doctors offered hospitalization several times, but she refused, as if she feared that she would never be able to return to her own apartment as a full-fledged mistress again. John was worried about his mom, but Ginny managed to convince him that Catherine was just trying to draw attention to herself. "John, if it were that serious and dangerous, the doctors wouldn't even ask permission. So relax." Another visit to the ambulance ended in Catherine's hospitalization. But that was more because John and Ginny had gone on vacation, and the heartbroken woman trusted the persuasive team. In a whirl of affairs, Fiona did not have time to call her former mother-in-law, and was very surprised when one day Anna came to her apartment without prior arrangement. The woman said that she did not come about sewing at all, and confessed, "Fiona, I'm sorry that now I will load you with problems, but I have no one to talk to about it. I'm very worried. Catherine is in dire straits. Moreover, since John and his bitch moved into my girlfriend's apartment, she's gone downhill. Her health has deteriorated. She's worried sick. She went into the hospital a week ago with a suspected stroke. She didn't tell me until the last minute, hiding the fact that she was so bad. I came to check on my friend and accidentally learned from the neighbors in the room that her dear son had never visited her. The doctor treating her, Mickey, wouldn't even talk to me because I'm not related to Catherine. Or maybe he was just busy. If you can, go and see her, Fiona. I think it might make her feel better. Fiona was very surprised. John called Oliver the day before yesterday, telling him what he was bringing, but he didn't mention Catherine's illness. Of course, Anna, I'll be sure to visit her. Just tell me where to find Catherine. The woman dictated all the details of the hospital and the hours of reception and hurried home, glad that she was not mistaken in her opinion about Fiona's sincere nature. No matter what, she was ready to support her ex-husband's mother. A visit to her ex-mother-in-law had come as a real shock to Fiona. Always so well-groomed and trim, Catherine looked clearly unhealthy. Puffy face had a strange shade, and the eyes, so piercing before, completely lost their luster. The right hand did not obey the woman, and the corner of the mouth floated down, giving her face a mournful expression. Catherine tried to rise when she saw her visitor, but she was unable to do so. Fiona stroked her former mother-in-law's hand and asked calmly as she could, "Why didn't you call me at once, Catherine?" Speech at the former mother-in-law became not too intelligible, but Fiona realized that she just did not want to bother her and assured, "Don't worry, everything is fine. No worries. I'll talk to your doctor and see if there's anything I need, and then I'll come and see you again." The doctor, when he found out that Fiona had come to find out about Catherine, began to sternly reprimand her. "I don't understand you relatives. A woman has been lying for a week and only her friend, who is almost older than she is, came to see her. You must be the daughter. Must be the daughter. In-law, right?" Fiona answered humbly, choosing to keep silent about the fact that Catherine was no longer her relative. "Yes, Mickey, that's right. You say all the right things, but that's just the way it is. So as not to take up too much of your time, just tell me what I can do for Catherine. Is there any medication she needs or caregivers she needs to pay for? You tell me, please." The doctor, noticing the sincere remorse of the patient's relative, softened. "I would have left her with us for a week to observe her condition and conduct additional tests. But I note, further recovery will depend on your joint efforts. Catherine is partially paralyzed, as you have probably already noticed, but the process can still be reversed. Massage, medication, and care of relatives have done wonders, so you should not despair. I will now give you booklets and leaflets in which everything is printed in detail, including the basic exercises." The man ran his eyes over the text of promotional materials, something crossed out, somewhere put exclamation marks in the margins, and handed the leaflets to Fiona. "Here you go. More detailed recommendations for medication support for the mother-in-law will be printed when she is discharged." Fiona thanked the doctor and worriedly placed the envelope on his desk. Mickey became very angry, and except for throwing the envelope in the visitor's face, "Goodbye. And don't do that again, do you understand?" The woman had no choice but to apologize and leave. The doctor rubbed his suddenly collapsed head. Despite the fact that there were many patients and their relatives behaved very differently, Fiona had caught his eye, whether it was her gentleness or the fire in her eyes that appeared when he spoke of her mother. In-laws' favorable prospects. A pleasant woman who didn't sway and listened attentively to recommendations was good for everyone. Besides, she was married to the patient's son. After taking a headache pill, Mickey began to fill in the data on the computer, just to avoid thinking any more about the meeting that had so disturbed him. Fiona was on her way home, glad that she had decided to go to her ex-mother-in-law's house alone first. The boys didn't need to see how weak their only grandmother was. The woman learned from Oliver that John would be out of the country for another 3 weeks. Thinking that her ex-husband didn't know anything about her mother's condition, Fiona decided to call him. Jeannie picked up the phone and with obvious reluctance, recognizable in the disgruntled tone of her voice, handed it to John. From the short conversation, Fiona learned that Catherine had been hospitalized almost immediately after her son and daughter-in-law had flown in for their vacation. John was even indignant. Fiona, the mother, is just trying to manipulate me. She needs her son to be near me, so she agreed to go to the hospital, so that I felt like a pig and rushed back. She got Aunt Valia to call me, and she got Aunt Valia to call me, and she got to you. They're all in it together, aren't they? Just to make me unhappy. You won't get anywhere. Tell your mother that. The man ended the call, and as much as Fiona tried to repeat the call, her ex-husband's machine became unavailable. The woman decided not to tell Catherine about her son's suspicions and began to visit the ex-mother-in-law every day, bringing her a little bit of her favorite dishes. On one of the visits, Fiona met Mickey in the corridor and learned that Catherine was likely to be discharged on Friday. The doctor warned, "Normally the paperwork is ready by 11 o'clock, but I'd advise you to come a little later. At least half an hour. I'd like to talk a little more carefully about your mother-in-law's home care. She lives with you, doesn't she?" Fiona nodded to avoid any more questions and promised to be there on Friday. Mickey said, saying goodbye, "If you can, buy an adult walker for that day. Catherine mustn't get too old, and the sooner you get started, the better. And try to take your husband to the discharge so that it would be easier to bring the patient to the car, because we have nurses just to break." The woman thanked the attentive man, but did not specify that her husband was already former and obviously would not be able to come to the hospital to meet her mother. Fiona had a bigger problem. She had to think about where to take her ex-mother-in-law. Taking Catherine to her home was out of the question. Anna, of course, lived nearby and could run in to see her friend, but could hardly provide her with full care. So most likely the most rational thing to do was to put the former mother-in-law at her place. However, before this, Fiona had to get Catherine's consent, and at the same time not to offend the woman with pity. She began a difficult conversation, very worried, and suggested, "How do you look at staying with me and the grandchildren? They miss you very much and will be incredibly happy." Catherine, hiding tears, agreed. She herself was afraid to be alone. Fiona explained to her sons that their grandmother would now live with them. The children greeted the news with enthusiastic cries, and the woman hurried to clarify, "Grandma Catherine is a little sick, so we'll have to keep our behavior down, okay?" The sons confirmed that they would behave. Oliver and Justin immediately offered to rearrange the room so that Grandma would be comfortable. Fiona felt better. She had no doubt that her former mother-in-law would recover more quickly in the company of her wonderful grandchildren. On the day of discharge, Fiona listened attentively to all Mickey's advice, said that she had already prepared the apartment with Catherine's health in mind, and for some reason this clarity pleased the doctor. He was pleased that his efforts would not be wasted, and that with the support of her family she would be able to return to her former activity. If he was sad that he would no longer see Fiona, he did not show it. Her grandchildren, who had come from school and picked up her brother from kindergarten on the way, and her faithful friend were already waiting for her in the apartment. With the help of a cab driver who turned out to be a responsive man, Fiona managed to get her former mother-in-law to the familiar door without any problems. The old woman had no idea that her return from the hospital would turn into such a heartwarming celebration. The older boys boasted about their achievements in school, and the youngest, Kevin, showed a card for the spring holiday. And then, when he realized that the souvenir was supposed to be a surprise for his mother, he was very embarrassed. Catherine's mood improved considerably in the merry bustle. A blush played on her cheeks, and she enjoyed watching Fiona, who was admiring her children. The woman took her sons to help her with the food, and Anna quietly reminded her friend of an old conversation she had had after meeting John's girlfriend. "You see, I was right when I tried to defend Fiona. She's got nothing but good qualities, and she's a great parent. Look at the helpers." Catherine only for a moment saddened, but then cheered up, confirming the rightness of her friend. "Yes, Anna, everything is so." By Fiona in general, scary to say, for the last week even more dear than my son became. How she took care of me. My roommates were jealous. After lunch, which was held in a pleasant atmosphere, Anna helped her friend to get settled in the room prepared for her. And Fiona ran to the drugstore to buy what was necessary for the care of the former mother-in-law. Taking on the care of Catherine, the woman realized that it would not be easy. But it was not the care that was harder, but the increased financial burden. Fiona quit, believing that on private orders will be able to earn about the same amount as in the atelier, but will be able to stay at home for a long time. John, who had blocked his ex-wife's phone, did not answer his mother's calls. Each time after another failed conversation, Catherine became sad and irritable, but Fiona never once snapped at the helpless woman. She tirelessly cheered her up with a look, a smile, or grandchildren sent in time. Life flowed in a new direction. Catherine did not get tired of admiring the former daughter-in-law. Gradually, Fiona's care gave positive results. The former mother-in-law got stronger and began to move independently, and even the right hand recovered so much that it returned to almost all the functions. Her handwriting was still uneven, but Catherine did not let herself relax. She borrowed her grandchildren's unfinished penmanship and practiced as hard as she could, having a mock competition with little Kevin. A few weeks later, when visiting the polyclinic at her place of residence, the district doctor, an experienced woman, advised to continue rehabilitation in the same spirit. "Catherine, I should suggest that you go to a sanatorium, but frankly, you don't even seem to need it." Fiona, who was accompanying Catherine, suddenly hesitated. The fact was that Mickey had mentioned something about sanatorium recovery and advised her not to turn down such an opportunity under any circumstances. She wanted her ex-mother-in-law to return to a full life. So Fiona asked for a trip. On the way home, the woman noticed that Catherine was driving with pinched lips and decided to clarify the situation. "Consider, I'm not trying to get rid of you. Not at all. I'm nervous about letting you go, too. You remember your doctor, don't you? He seemed very knowledgeable and authoritative. Well, he recommended that you take advantage of a sanitarium. I'll ask Anna to keep you company. You'll see, it'll be good for you." Fiona took Anna as her accomplice, who agreed that the sanatorium was much better equipped. The woman was persuaded by a friend. "Ekaterina, you don't even think about it. It is necessary to go and recover, especially since the direction is likely to give in the sanatorium, located within the city. You know, like the direction to the former Obkomovsky Daisha. So, if you suddenly don't like it, we'll call a cab, and in 20 minutes, we'll be home with you already drinking tea. What's there to think about?" Catherine was embarrassed that Fiona was spending money to prepare for the sanatorium, buying her former mother-in-law bathing accessories for the pool, a comfortable suit, and other small things. The elderly woman tried to object, but her former daughter-in-law did not give up, and in one of the next arguments said, "Ekaterina, you once welcomed me into your family, although of course, even then I realized how much I have a different level with John. Let me take care of you as my own mother, at least a little." After these words, Catherine did not hold back and cried. She was so ashamed to remember how she sarcastic to her daughter-in-law, and it turns out that she not only did not hold a grudge, but also believes that she was fully accepted into the family. Fiona rushed to comfort the weeping woman and promised, "You and Anna don't worry, I'll be sure to visit you with the boys." Fiona took a cab and drove Catherine and her friend to the sanatorium, and they, excited by the new adventure in their lives, waved long after the responsive woman who had become a former mother-in-law, much more dear than John, who did not appear on the horizon. According to the terms, he should have returned from vacation, but his mother did not deign to call. Catherine also stopped dialing her son's number. It was too painful to realize that he ignored her calls. Fulfilling the promise, Fiona, having clarified the authorized time of visits, together with her sons on the next weekend, went to the sanatorium to visit Catherine and Anna. During one of the telephone conversations, the former mother-in-law asked to bring unroasted sunflower seeds, promising to show the almost tame squirrels that inhabited the park at the sanatorium. Fiona, in addition to the offerings for the animals, brought some of her own pies, figuring that a home-cooked meal would never be out of place. The wonderful weather allowed them to talk not in the hall, but to go out into the air and walk along the picturesque paths. The boys enjoyed the squirrels, who were so accustomed to people that they quietly took treats right out of the palm of their hands. Fiona asked visibly refreshed women how they rest in the sanatorium, and Catherine admitted, "I'm just happy that I let myself be persuaded. It is also very fortunate that my attending physician, Mickey, you probably remember him, turns out to be here also part-time. He said that I've made a lot of progress since the day I left the hospital, and I know for a fact that it's because of your care." Fiona shrugged embarrassedly. "You've put enough effort into this yourself." Anna supported the conversation with a joke about how medicine is powerless if the patient wants to live, and all three women laughed. The walk had been marvelous. Fiona marveled at the clean air, the agile animals, and her sons, who seemed to be relieved of their burdens. Suddenly, the pleasant promenade was interrupted by a familiar voice from behind. "Ekaterina, Anna, visiting time is about to end." Fiona turned around, already assuming she saw Mickey. Her hearing didn't fail her. It was Dr. Mickey. The man also recognized the woman he remembered as soon as he saw Catherine in the sanatorium and secretly dreamed of meeting her. He himself did not understand why he was so attracted to another man's wife and could not do anything about his feelings. The woman greeted him politely and thanked him. "Mickey, thank you so much for the recommendation and for your sensitivity. I can see, even with my unprofessional eyes, that Catherine's condition has improved. And Anna is clearly younger." In response, the doctor returned the woman a phrase that could well be taken as a compliment. "To be honest, a huge part of the improvement in your mother-in-law's health belongs to you. Catherine makes no secret of the fact that it was you who kept her from getting stuck in her illness." The man really wanted to talk to Fiona more, but he forced himself to say goodbye to her, and once again reminded the patients to keep to their regimen and get to dinner on time. Fiona and her sons said a warm goodbye to Catherine and Anna and headed for the nearest public transportation stop to get home. As luck would have it, the bus didn't show up. People kept arriving, and soon the crowd began to hear a variety of theories. From a broken bus to an accident. Kevin was tired and cranky, and Fiona had a hard time calming him down, at least for a short time. Suddenly, a car slowed down next to the bus stop pavilion. The window rolled down, and Mickey, who was driving, offered Fiona and the children a ride to the busier parts of town. The woman gladly accepted. She was anxious to get home. She was tired because she'd been working on a rush order last night and had only gotten a couple hours of sleep. Fiona sat down next to the doctor and asked him which way he was going, so that she could get a better idea of where to get off. Mickey asked back to find out where the woman needed to go and excitedly informed her that he was on his way. "Great, then I'll take you straight home." As hard as Fiona tried to stay awake, she dozed off and woke only when Oliver reached over from the back seat and touched her shoulder. "Mom, wake up, we're here." Embarrassed, Fiona offered the kindly doctor money for gas money at least, but he flatly refused, explaining that he was on his way anyway. The closer approached Saturday, on which Fiona and her sons planned another trip to the sanatorium, the more the woman worried. The excitement was so strong that even her sister Alice, who had called, noticed it. Fiona was embarrassed to admit that her nervousness was due to the fact that she was likely to meet Mickey again. She liked the man very much, but the woman felt that she had absolutely nothing to hope for. Her ex-husband's words that no one would want her with 3 children came to mind. Fiona sadly noted that her sons were not really needed by their father, so it was naive to expect any warm feelings for them from a complete stranger. To Fiona's great surprise, when they met, Anna took a moment, when Catherine was busy with her grandchildren, to relay her conversation with Mickey. Our wonderful doctor tactfully asked why he had never seen her son around Catherine, but only you and the grandchildren. "No offense, Fiona, but I told him that you and John had divorced, and he was as if he had been molded by his new wife and had forgotten everything about the world. You know, I think Mickey's got a real soft spot for you, so don't get lost. I know from the nurses here that he's been divorced a long time, and has a reputation for not liking affairs. Maybe something good will come between you two. You both deserve to be happy, and personally, I'll be holding my fists up for your future happiness." Anna's revelation was stopped by Kevin, who ran up to his mother to show her an unusual yellow ladybug. Fiona didn't get to see Mickey on that visit, but a week later he not only gave her and the boys a ride home, but asked her out on a date. Oliver, Justin, and Kevin, from whom the man had first asked permission, advised their mother to accept the invitation. The romance between the doctor and Fiona developed rapidly. The man did not want to lose a day and managed to convince the woman that he could be trusted. By the time when Catherine and Anna had to leave the sanatorium, he managed to make Fiona's sons comfortable and even stayed overnight several times. The woman was happy, although she was concerned about how to communicate her new relationship to Catherine. Not that she had to give her former mother-in-law a report or justify herself, but still she felt some awkwardness. However, the worries were in vain. Shrewd friends immediately noticed that there was a mutual sympathy between the doctor and Fiona. Former mother-in-law regretted only that her son missed his own happiness and betrayed the family. Catherine regretted that his actions John burned all the bridges, and Fiona will not forgive him. However, after the sanatorium to go to the apartment of the former daughter, in-law woman flatly refused. "Thank you, my dear, for your care, for shelter, for affection, but it's time for me to know my honor. In guests, as they say, good, but at home is better." Catherine's return home was a surprise to both John and Ginny. The woman entered the living room, which had lost its tidy appearance because of the renovation that had begun, and asked, "Well, son, how are you doing here? You're renovating, aren't you? Well done. Why didn't you even ask me for advice, or are you now only interested in the opinion of your new wife?" The man said, "No, Mom, I just didn't want to bother you. The neighbor said that you are in a sanatorium, and they're probably, or treatments or something like that. I was afraid I'd call at the wrong time." The older woman sighed and went to her room. She was uncomfortable listening to her favorite son's ridiculous excuses, and she admitted to herself that she missed the pleasant atmosphere in Fiona's apartment. Here, within her own walls, Catherine felt her loneliness, especially acutely. A few days later in the evening, Fiona received a call from Mickey, who was on duty, informing her that an ambulance had recently taken Catherine to the hospital. The man asked the woman to come as soon as possible, saying that he couldn't say much over the phone. Asking her sons not to misbehave, the woman rushed to the meeting. The man met his beloved near the door and took her outside to report strange information. Catherine's condition was stabilized. They brought her in on time. But that's not the main thing I want to tell you. Fiona, it's not easy for me to tell you this, but I'm pretty sure that your ex-mother in-law's seizure today was triggered by medications that are contraindicated for her. I asked her what she was taking, and she didn't say anything specific. She said she felt fine in the morning, but then she got worse in the afternoon. You see, I think there's something fishy going on. If I voice these suspicions to the police, they'll probably send me away. Tell me, could your ex-husband have poisoned your mother?" The woman was shocked, but didn't think much about the answer. "John, of course, hurt me a lot, but no. He loves his mom. Although after the wedding, he's been acting more and more like he obeys his Ginny. She's the one I think is capable of anything." Mickey suggested it. "Look, if you're so sure about this, John, we should open him up to the truth. I have a friend in the police who will be able to expose the poisoner, because it is quite possible that the first time Catherine went to the hospital was not accidental." Fiona's hair literally stood on end. The woman became agitated. "Mickey, it's not nice of me to say this without proof, but anything's possible. John and his new wife had just gone on vacation, and before that, this lady could have put anything in the food and sort of stayed clean. In no case should an official investigation be allowed. Catherine would not be able to avoid being questioned. With her shrewdness, Ginny's suspicion would not remain a secret for long. I am afraid that Catherine will not be able to bear such information. The doctor thought for a moment. It became clear to him that it would be necessary to involve an acquaintance to bypass the existing rules, and promising not to hurry, he said goodbye to Fiona and hurried back to duty. All night he thought about the delicate situation in which his favorite woman was indirectly involved. And in the morning he consulted with a policeman he knew who suggested that he just informally talk to the suspect. The conversation produced a most unexpected result. Jeannie, in her husband's absence, had cleared her mother-in-law's apartment of all the valuables and cash that John had kept in a well-known hiding place. Fiona had heard about it from Mickey. A friend from the police station shared the news about the missing persons report with him. John had filed the report, it turned out, so she wasn't too surprised when her confused ex-husband showed up at her door. John reached out to kiss her, but the woman recoiled so much that the man even took offense. "Fiona, why are you being so out of touch? I realize I made a mistake. Let's try to build our life again, for the sake of our boys, for the sake of my mom." Seeing the change in Fiona's face, John was confused for a moment. He hadn't expected his ex-wife's heart to melt like chocolate in the sun, but he'd hoped for a more cordial welcome. The woman didn't even let him into the apartment. On the contrary, she fumbled for her keys on the coat rack without looking away. Fiona went out to her ex-husband in the entryway, slamming the door behind her, and only then spoke. "And which of your mistakes did you realize? When you cheated, when you forgot about your children and mom, or when you brought a poisoner into the house?" "Fiona, you have to understand, I'm just crazy. Let's start from scratch." But the woman was adamant. "John, you once helped me make a very important discovery. You can't be disappointed in yourself. I was needed in spite of everything you said. All I can do, and for Catherine in the first place, is to throw out all the food and drinks from her apartment and replace them with safe ones so that your mother will not risk her health anymore." John agreed to help in this way as well, counting on the fact that during the cleanup he would be able to remind the woman of how good they were together. But things didn't go according to his plan. Mickey joined them, and Anna happily agreed to play with Fiona's sons. By the time Catherine was discharged, there was nothing left in the apartment to harm her, and John had given up on his attempts to get his ex-wife back. He filed for a dissolution of his marriage to Ginny in absentia. On his way out of the registry office, the man ran into Fiona and Mickey on the stairs and couldn't hold back his surprised exclamation. "What are you doing here?" Fiona smiled softly and told him that they were here to apply for marriage. John, not even trying to seem sincere, wished his ex-wife happiness and, turning abruptly, hurried to his car. The man sat for a long time without moving from his seat and speculating about the moment when his life turned in the wrong direction. Now only his mother was left next to him, before whom he was irredeemably guilty.